The journey back home felt like a dream. Captain John Graves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars twinkled in the distance, peaceful and distant. But for Graves, they now held a new meaning. Humanity had faced the impossible, had fought an enemy beyond comprehension, and had emerged victorious. The galaxy was safe, and Earth, the cradle of humanity, was untouched. "Captain, we've just received word from the Galactic Council," Lieutenant Rachel James said, pulling him from his thoughts. "They're calling this victory a turning point for the galaxy." Graves turned toward her. "What do you mean?" James smiled slightly. "They're saying humanity's bravery has changed the course of history. The galaxy will never look at us the same way again." Graves nodded slowly. He had never imagined that humanity, a relatively young and small species in the grand scheme of the galaxy, would be the ones to save everyone. But here they were. The war was over, and the entity that had threatened the entire galaxy was no more. "Send a message to the fleet," Graves ordered. "Tell them we'll be heading back to Earth. They've earned their rest." The crew worked quickly, transmitting the message across the fleet. Graves took a deep breath and looked out at the stars once more. There was still so much to process, so many emotions to sort through. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but there had been sacrifices along the way. Friends, allies, and comrades had been lost. The cost of victory weighed heavily on his heart, but it was also tempered by the knowledge that their efforts had not been in vain. As the fleet made its way back toward Earth, the survivors reflected on the journey that had led them here. It wasn't just about defeating a powerful enemy. It was about the strength of the human spirit. It was about the determination to survive, to protect what was theirs, and to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The Zakar ships, though not a part of humanity's world, now sailed alongside them, a symbol of the alliance that had been forged in the heat of battle. The galaxy, once divided by distance and mistrust, was now united in a way that hadn't been seen for centuries. Back on Earth, the world awaited the return of their heroes. The humans, who had faced the unknown with courage and ingenuity, were now the galaxy's champions. The people of Earth had always been proud of their achievements, but nothing would ever compare to the pride they felt now. Their species had proven that they could stand tall among the stars. As the Resolute approached Earth, Graves allowed himself a rare moment of peace. The battle was over. The galaxy was safe. Humanity had done more than just survive. They had thrived. And they had proven that, even in the darkest hour, when all hope seemed lost, they would rise to the occasion. Graves turned to his crew, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "We did it," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We saved the galaxy. And now, we have a future." The Resolute entered Earth's atmosphere, and the crew's faces lit up as they saw the familiar sight of their home. The people below had no idea what had just happened in the stars above, but they would soon learn. The galaxy was forever changed, and humanity had left its mark on the universe. And with that, the crew of the Resolute knew their work was just beginning. They had secured peace, but the legacy of humanity would echo through the stars for generations to come. The journey to the heart of the galaxy was long, and every moment counted. Captain John Graves paced back and forth on the bridge of the Resolute, the flagship of the human fleet. The stars outside flickered like distant beacons, as if mocking the uncertainty that hung in the air. Every officer and soldier aboard knew the risks. No one had ever faced an enemy like this. But they were ready. The fleet was small, a handful of ships compared to the powerful alien forces that had already been overrun by the ancient entity. Yet in this moment, it wasn't the size that mattered. It was the resolve. Humanity had learned to survive by thinking differently, adapting quickly, and most of all, never giving up. These were their strengths. They were about to put them to the test. Lieutenant Rachel James, the first officer, stood next to Graves, watching the vast emptiness of space unfold before them. Her thoughts were a mix of determination and doubt, but she kept it to herself. The crew was already on edge, And it wasn't the time for uncertainty. She couldn't afford to show any weakness, not with the crew looking to her, and the captain for leadership. "Everything is set, Captain," Rachel said, breaking the silence. "The fleet is prepared. The engines are primed. We're as ready as we'll ever be." Graves nodded, his eyes focused on the stars ahead. He had a reputation for being calm under pressure, but inside, his mind was racing. He thought of Earth, the planet they were fighting to protect. It had always been a world filled with conflict, yet it had survived, grown stronger with each challenge. This time, humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. "Let's double-check the fleet," Graves ordered. "I want every ship ready for anything. We have no idea what we'll find out there." "No mistakes." Rachel's voice was steady. "Understood, sir. We'll run a final systems check." Meanwhile, in the engineering bay, technicians worked tirelessly to ensure the ship's systems were functioning at peak capacity. The Resolute was a marvel of human engineering, built to withstand the harshest conditions. Its advanced weaponry was designed for precision, and its shields were reinforced to stand against the unknown. But it was more than just technology. It was the crew. Human ingenuity and creativity would be their greatest asset. Private Liam Andrews, a young soldier, stood in the cargo hold, tightening the straps on his gear. He was nervous, though he did his best to hide it. He'd trained for this moment his entire life, but the reality of the mission was different from the simulations. There was no reset in real life. If something went wrong, there would be no second chance. He took a deep breath, his hand steadying as he adjusted the weapon on his side. They had all been given one clear task: survive, adapt, and fight. No matter what they encountered, they were prepared to give everything to protect the galaxy. Back on the bridge, Graves stood before the view screen, watching the stars blur as the fleet prepared to jump into warp speed. He knew there was no turning back now. Humanity had made its choice. They would either save the galaxy or become a footnote in the history of the universe. As the final countdown began, the crew of the Resolute felt a surge of purpose. They weren't just soldiers, scientists, or leaders. They were the last hope. Humanity had answered the call, and no matter what came next, they would face it head-on, united in their mission to save the galaxy from certain destruction. As the human fleet crossed the vast expanse of space, the cold void seemed endless. It had been days since they left Earth, and Captain John Graves couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at him. He had prepared for battle in countless ways, studying alien tactics, practicing with his officers, planning strategies for every possible scenario, but nothing had prepared him for what lay ahead. The vastness of space made the unknown seem all the more terrifying. The fleet moved cautiously, aware of the growing tension in the galaxy as they neared the enemy's territory. The dark energy that had been spreading for weeks was becoming stronger, sending ripples of fear across the stars. The strange disturbances, stars vanishing, entire planets wiped off the map, were only a warning of the unimaginable force that awaited them. "Captain, we've reached the coordinates," Lieutenant Rachel James said, her voice calm but edged with concern. "Sensors are picking up unusual readings. It's like nothing we've encountered before." Graves nodded, his jaw tightening. They had expected the unknown, but the reality was still unsettling. His eyes scanned the command center as the crew of the Resolute worked in perfect synchrony, their every movement precise, as if they knew what was at stake. The fleet came to a halt in the center of the anomaly. The stars around them dimmed, as if an invisible shadow had fallen over them. The silence on the bridge was deafening. "Prepare for scan, all stations," Graves ordered. "Let's see what we're dealing with." As the crew worked to calibrate the ship's systems, a deep hum filled the air, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the hull. A moment later, the ship's sensors went wild, and a warning light flashed across the control panel. "Captain, we've got movement," the sensor officer shouted. "Multiple ships closing in. Fast." Graves' heart raced. They weren't alone anymore. On the view screen, Alien ships began to materialize from the shadows, their sleek forms unmistakable. The enemy fleet was massive, far larger than the human fleet. Their ships were adorned with alien designs, glowing symbols, and sharp, menacing shapes that made them look like creatures from another world. The sheer size of the fleet was overwhelming, and Graves realized just how serious the situation had become. They were outnumbered. "Take evasive maneuvers," Graves shouted, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "Activate shields and prepare weapons." The Resolute jolted as the crew worked to avoid the incoming fire, but the alien ships were fast, too fast. Blasts of energy shot toward them, the first of many attacks. The Resolute rocked as the shields absorbed the impact, but the force pushed the ship off course. Graves could see the other human ships struggling to hold their ground. The battle had begun. "Target their weak points," Graves ordered. "Focus fire on the engines. We need to slow them down." The Resolute returned fire, sending a blast of concentrated energy toward the nearest alien ship. The attack struck its shields, and for a brief moment, the ship faltered, revealing the small weakness in its defenses. The human ships pressed forward, their weapons striking with precision. The enemy was powerful, but they hadn't counted on humanity's tactics. Fast, calculated, and relentless. The battle raged on, each blast and counterattack sending shockwaves through space. Captain Graves kept his focus, his mind calculating every move as the Resolute fought with everything it had. But this was only the beginning. If the enemy could summon this much force so easily, there was no telling what they were truly capable of. As the battle intensified, Graves knew one thing for certain. Humanity was in the fight of its life, but they wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. The battle had reached a critical point. After weeks of fighting, the combined forces of humanity and their new Zekar allies had pushed the ancient entity's minions back. The alien fleets, once organized and terrifying, were now in disarray. Humanity had shown that they could stand up to the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But even with their victory so far, the worst was yet to come. Captain John Graves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking out at the dark expanse of space. His mind was racing. Despite their recent successes, they were still facing the most powerful being the galaxy had ever seen. The ancient entity was still out there, its full power yet to be unleashed. The humans and the Zekar had managed to hold off its forces, but it was only a matter of time before the entity turned its attention to them. "Captain, we've detected the entity's energy signature," Lieutenant Rachel James reported, her voice strained. "It's heading toward us. Fast." Graves' heart sank. He knew this moment was coming. The entity had been lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. Now it was ready to make its move. "Deploy all ships into defensive formation," Graves ordered. "We're not running. We'll fight to the end." The crew moved quickly, preparing the human and Zekar ships for the inevitable battle. Every officer, every soldier aboard knew what was at stake. They had already faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about saving everything they had ever known. As the entity's presence grew closer, the air on the Resolute felt heavy. Graves' mind was filled with 1,000 thoughts. Doubts, fears, questions. But one thing was clear. Humanity had come too far to back down now. They had already proven that they could overcome the impossible. "Prepare weapons," Graves said, his voice firm. "We've fought for this moment. We will not be the ones to fall." The Zekar ships took their positions beside the human fleet, their sleek, powerful vessels ready for battle. Their advanced technology had already proven invaluable, but now, the true test was upon them. The entity's power was beyond comprehension, and they were the last line of defense. The first wave of enemy ships appeared on the sensors, swarming toward them like a tidal wave. The Resolute fired its weapons, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the oncoming fleet. The Zekar ships followed suit, their advanced weapons cutting through the alien forces with deadly precision. But it wasn't enough. The entity itself had arrived. A massive dark ship appeared on the screen, its presence overwhelming. It was unlike anything Graves had ever seen, a living nightmare, pulsing with dark energy. The ship's surface seemed to shimmer with an unnatural glow, and the air around it crackled with power. The entity's full power was now on display, and it was clear that the humans and their allies were facing something far greater than they could have imagined. "Open fire," Graves shouted. The Resolute unleashed everything it had, every weapon, every last ounce of energy. The battle raged on, the human and Scifi fleets firing relentlessly, trying to hold back the onslaught. But the entity's ship was invulnerable. The energy blasts that hit it barely caused a ripple, and the vastness of its power seemed to swallow everything in its path. Graves knew they couldn't win by fighting alone. They needed something more, something that no one had expected. He turned to Lieutenant James. "Activate the final weapon," Graves said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. James hesitated, looking at him in disbelief. "Sir, we've never tested it. We don't know what it will do." Graves looked her in the eye. "We don't have a choice. It's time to gamble everything." With a nod, James quickly began the sequence to activate the final weapon. It was a risky move, a weapon designed to channel the combined power of the human and Scifi fleets into a single devastating blast. The weapon had never been used before. It was their last, desperate hope. As the weapon powered up, the entire fleet braced for the unknown. The Resolute's shields flickered, barely holding as the energy from the final weapon began to charge. Graves watched the enemy ship, knowing this might be their only shot. "Now," Graves ordered. The weapon fired, a massive beam of energy that cut through space, brighter than 1,000 suns. It struck the entity's ship with a force that shook the fabric of the universe itself. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, the entity's ship began to tremble, its shields flickering. The beam had broken through. Humanity had made the impossible possible. They had struck a blow that even the ancient entity could not ignore. The tide of battle had shifted, but the fight was far from over. The energy from the final weapon surged through space, a brilliant beam of light brighter than anything the humans had ever seen. For a moment, it seemed as though the universe had paused, holding its breath. The beam hit the heart of the entity's ship, sending shockwaves through the very fabric of space. The entity's ship shuddered, its shields flickering like a dying ember, and for the first time, its immense power seemed to falter. Captain John Graves watched in silence as the entity's vessel trembled, its once unshakable exterior showing signs of weakness. The humans and Scifi forces had dealt the entity a blow that no one had believed possible. But even as they celebrated this small victory, Graves knew it was far from over. "Captain, the entity's ship is weakening," Lieutenant Rachel James reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "Their shields are down. We've broken through." Graves' heart raced. This was their chance. He couldn't afford to hesitate now. The enemy was dangerous, and it could recover quickly. He gave the order without a second thought. "All ships, concentrate fire on the core of the enemy ship, now." The human fleet, supported by the Scifi ships, moved into position, unleashing everything they had left. Blasts of energy, missiles, and plasma beams filled the void of space, striking the heart of the entity's vessel. The powerful beam from the final weapon had opened a small window of vulnerability, and the humans would not waste it. The enemy ship screamed in pain, its surface cracking as explosions erupted across its hull. But the entity itself was still alive, its presence darkening the battlefield. From within the wreckage, a strange, eerie light began to pulse. It was as though the very core of the entity was resisting, trying to fight back with everything it had. Graves gripped the armrest of his chair, his knuckles white. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was the final stand. If they couldn't destroy the entity now, the galaxy would be lost. He looked over to Lieutenant James, who met his gaze. She didn't need to say a word. She knew what had to be done. "We can't afford to wait any longer," Graves said, his voice firm. "Full power to the final weapon. We're going in." The Zekar ships, led by Captain Psylocke, adjusted their positions, providing cover for the human fleet. The Resolute and the other human ships began to move forward, their weapons still firing as they closed in on the entity's core. The entity's ship, now falling apart, seemed to retaliate with every ounce of its remaining strength, but it was clear that the human and Zekar forces were gaining ground. The final weapon was charging again, ready for one last, devastating strike. Graves could feel the tension on the bridge. Every officer, every soldier, knew this was the moment they had been fighting for. There was no turning back now. "Captain," Rachel's voice broke the silence. "We're ready." Graves nodded. "Fire." The final weapon, powered by the combined might of the human and Zekar fleets, released another massive burst of energy, a beam so powerful that it seemed to tear through the fabric of space itself. The blast hit the core of the entity's ship with such force that the entire vessel erupted in a blinding flash of light. It was as though the universe had exploded in on itself. The entity let out a final chilling scream as its ship crumbled into nothingness, its once overwhelming presence reduced to ashes. The battlefield fell silent. The human fleet, along with their Zekar allies, had done the impossible. They had defeated the entity, the ancient force that had threatened to devour the entire galaxy. The galaxy was saved, and humanity had proven itself once again. They had answered the call when no one else had. And in doing so, they had become more than just survivors. They had become the saviors of the galaxy. As Graves watched the remains of the entity's ship drift into the void, he felt a deep sense of pride and relief. The battle was over, but the legacy of humanity would live on, stronger than ever. The silence that followed the final blast was deafening. The once chaotic battlefield, filled with the flashes of energy and the roar of weapons, now felt empty, like the galaxy itself was catching its breath. The massive entity, the ancient force that had threatened everything, was no more. Its ship had been reduced to debris, and its presence had disappeared from the universe. Captain John Graves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his eyes fixed on the black void of space. His heart still raced from the intensity of the battle, but there was also a sense of relief settling in. The galaxy had been saved. Humanity had done the impossible. "Captain, the enemy fleet is retreating," Lieutenant Rachel James reported, her voice calm but filled with awe. "It's over. We've won." Graves nodded, though a part of him still couldn't believe it. They had defeated the entity. The threat had been wiped out, but there was still work to do. The battle had been costly. The fleet had suffered losses, and many lives had been lost in the fight. Yet despite the cost, humanity had prevailed. "Send a message to the fleet," Graves said. "Let them know they did it. We all did." As the message went out, Graves looked out at the stars. Earth, his home, was safe. The galaxy was safe, but he knew that peace was fragile. This victory, as sweet as it was just one battle in a much larger war. They had proven that humanity could face the impossible, but what if another threat came? What if the peace they had fought so hard to protect could be shattered again? "Captain," James said, breaking his thoughts, "we're receiving a message from the Zekar fleet." Graves turned to face the communications officer, who looked at him with an expression of surprise. "Put it through," he ordered. The screen flickered to life, and the face of Captain Psylocke, the leader of the Zekar, appeared on the screen. The alien's expression was solemn, but there was a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "Captain Graves," Psylocke said, his voice deep and steady, "we have never witnessed such courage, such strength, from any race in the galaxy. Your people have fought with honor and determination. We owe you our gratitude." Graves nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "Thank you, Captain. But we couldn't have done it alone. It was our combined strength that made this victory possible." Xylox's eyes flickered, a rare hint of emotion in his usually stoic expression. True, but it was humanity's resolve that turned the tide. Your species may be young in the grand scheme of the galaxy, but you have shown that you are more than capable of standing with us, and even leading us. We are honored to have fought alongside you. Graves couldn't help but smile. The Xakar, a race that had never interfered in galactic matters before, were now acknowledging humanity as a force to be reckoned with. It was a victory not just for humanity, but for all the species that had joined forces to defeat the entity. "We are honored as well, Captain," Graves said, "and I hope this is just the beginning of a new chapter for the galaxy. Together, we can build a future where this kind of threat never rises again." Thylox nodded. The galaxy will never forget the bravery of humanity. This victory will echo through the stars. As the transmission ended, Graves stood for a moment in silence, contemplating the weight of the words. The galaxy had been saved, and humanity had earned its place among the stars. They had proven that, even in the darkest hour, they could rise to the challenge. And with the support of their new allies, they would ensure that peace would reign. For now, and for the future. The Resolute and the other ships began their journey back home, but Graves knew that this victory wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. Humanity had made its mark, and the galaxy would never be the same again. As the message from Earth reached the Galactic Council, a wave of uncertainty spread through the allied species. The leaders of the various races stared at the simple words on their screens, trying to make sense of the decision made by humanity. Why would they answer a call so dangerous? The humans were not known for their military strength compared to the ancient civilizations of the galaxy, yet they had made their choice. Captain John Graves stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute, staring out at the vastness of space as his ship prepared for launch. The reality of the mission was beginning to settle in. He had led soldiers into countless battles, but this was different. The enemy they were about to face was no ordinary force. It was a force of nature, unstoppable, ancient, and full of power beyond imagination. Yet, as a human, Graves knew one thing for sure. They would never give up without a fight. "Sir, all systems are ready for launch," his first officer, Lieutenant Rachel James, said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but Graves could see the worry in her eyes. The stakes were high, and they were about to head into the heart of the unknown. "Thank you, Lieutenant," Graves replied. "Let's make sure the rest of the fleet is ready. We don't know what we'll be walking into, but we walk in together." The human fleet, a modest group of warships, was ready to face the darkness. Each ship was outfitted with the latest in human technology, designed to be agile and adaptable. They were smaller than most of the alien fleets, but they made up for it with speed, precision, and the unwavering will to survive. As the fleet set course toward the coordinates given by the Galactic Council, Graves couldn't help but think about Earth. The planet that had sent them on this journey was one of resilience. Humanity had faced extinction countless times throughout its history, from wars to natural disasters, but it had always found a way to rise again. This was their greatest challenge yet, and they would face it head-on. On Earth, the message to prepare for battle had been broadcast across the globe. Governments, military leaders, and scientists all came together, putting aside differences for the survival of their species and the galaxy. Soldiers trained harder. Engineers worked around the clock to ensure the fleet's equipment was in perfect working order, and civilians sent messages of hope to the soldiers heading into space. The whole planet had united for one purpose: to stop the entity that threatened to destroy everything. Back on the Resolute, Captain Graves held a quiet meeting with his senior officers. They knew what lay ahead, and they knew that their mission might be a one-way trip. Yet there was no fear in their hearts. Humanity was used to the impossible, and time again, they had defied the odds. "We may be the smallest fleet out here," Graves said, his voice strong, "but we have something the others don't: our will. We will not stop until this enemy is defeated. We are human. We don't run. We fight." The officers nodded, a quiet resolve settling over them. They had no idea what they were about to face, but they were ready. Humanity was ready. The human fleet continued its journey toward the unknown, a single thought in their minds. No matter what happened, they would not let the galaxy fall into darkness. They were the last hope, and they would prove that humanity was never to be underestimated. The explosion from the human fleet's experimental weapon had rocked the battlefield. The massive alien command ship, once a symbol of invincibility, now lay in ruins, its shattered remains floating in space like a broken shell. The shockwave from the blast sent ripples through the remaining alien fleet, creating an opening for humanity's forces to press forward. Captain John Graves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the chaos unfold. The alien ships, once organized and synchronized, were now scrambling. Their coordination had broken down, and humanity's tactical advantage had grown. The fleet was still outnumbered, but the humans now had the momentum. "Captain, the alien forces are retreating," Lieutenant Rachel James said, her voice full of surprise. "They're pulling back." Graves couldn't believe it. The enemy who had seemed so powerful and unstoppable just days ago was retreating in the face of humanity's unexpected strike. But he didn't have time to dwell on their victory. "Don't let up," Graves commanded. "We have to press our advantage before they regroup." But as the human fleet closed in on the retreating alien ships, something unexpected happened. Out of the corner of his eye, Graves noticed a new movement. A group of alien ships, previously hidden in the shadows of a nearby asteroid field, emerged. They weren't retreating. They were advancing. These ships were different from the others, sleeker, more agile, and their markings were unfamiliar. "Sir, new ships detected," the sensor officer reported. "They don't match the design of the enemy fleet. They're different." Graves' heart skipped a beat. Were these reinforcements, or was it a trap? He didn't have time to make a decision. The new alien ships were already approaching, fast and closing in on the human fleet. "Hold fire for now," Graves ordered, his voice steady. "Let's see what they want." The new ships came closer, and soon their comms opened. A single alien voice crackled through the ship's speakers, calm, yet heavy with authority. "This is Captain Psylocke of the Zakar Alliance. We come to offer our aid." Graves blinked in disbelief. The Zakar Alliance. He had heard of them. An ancient and powerful race that had remained isolated from the rest of the galaxy for centuries. They had never been involved in galactic conflicts, keeping to their own territories. But now, they were here, offering help. "Captain Psylocke, we didn't expect your arrival," Graves said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "What's the meaning of this?" "We've been watching." Psylocke's voice responded. "Your victory over the command ship did not go unnoticed. The entity that threatens this galaxy is an ancient enemy of the Zakar. We have kept our distance until now, but it seems your species has the strength to stand against it." Graves couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Zakar had been watching, and now they were ready to join the fight. Humanity's unexpected success had caught their attention, and perhaps even earned their respect. "We don't need your help," Graves said firmly, but Psylocke's voice interrupted him. "You do not understand the full scope of this enemy, human. It is more than just a threat to your planet. It has destroyed countless civilizations before, and it will not stop until the entire galaxy is consumed. We have the knowledge and technology to fight it. If you will accept our aid." Graves hesitated. This was unexpected, but the situation had changed. The galaxy needed all the help it could get, and the Zakar might be the key to defeating the ancient entity once and for all. "Understood," Graves replied after a long pause. "We'll accept your help, Captain. But make no mistake, we will lead this fight. Humanity is not backing down now." Psylocke's voice softened, a rare hint of respect in the tone. "As it should be, human. Together, we will stop this threat." For the first time since the war had begun, Graves felt a flicker of hope. The Zakar, a race that had never before interfered in galactic matters, were now on their side. Humanity had proven itself to be a force that could not be ignored, and with the help of an unlikely ally, they might just have a chance to stop the ancient entity and save the galaxy. The battle had only just begun, but now, the humans were no longer alone. They had an ally, and together, they would fight to the very end. The galaxy was on the brink of destruction. For centuries, different alien species had lived in uneasy peace, their worlds separated by vast distances and differences. But something had changed. Something ancient and terrifying had awoken deep in the heart of the universe, a being older than any star, a creature with the power to devour entire galaxies. It had been dormant for millennia, but now it was awake and coming for them all. The first sign of its return was a series of strange cosmic disturbances. Stars flickered and disappeared, entire systems vanished without a trace, and no one knew why. As the survivors fled to the farthest corners of the galaxy, the leaders of the most powerful species gathered, trying to make sense of the chaos. They quickly realized that they were up against something beyond their understanding, something that could not be stopped by their advanced technology or their alliances. In desperation, the allied species of the galaxy did what they never thought they would do. They sent out a message, a distress signal, a cry for help that echoed across the cosmos. They called out to any race that could hear them, any species capable of helping them face this unimaginable threat. It was their last hope. Help us. The end is near. If you are out there, we need you. The message was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, hoping that someone, anyone, would answer. The alien species had their doubts, for they knew the dangers they faced. But what choice did they have? The darkness was spreading, and if they didn't act quickly, the ancient entity would consume everything in its path. Weeks passed. The signal was met with silence. The alien civilizations waited, anxiously watching as their worlds grew darker, as their cities and ships were slowly destroyed by the force they could not comprehend. The distress signal kept playing, but no one came. Fear began to take hold of the galaxy's leaders. They thought they might be alone in this fight, left to face the end by themselves. Then, one day, there was a response, not from any of the galaxy's advanced species, but from a distant, isolated world. Earth. The signal was received by the command center of the Galactic Council. It wasn't much, just a simple message, transmitted with the strength of human resolve. We will come. The leaders stared at the message in disbelief. Of all the civilizations in the galaxy, it was humanity, a race they had dismissed as insignificant, who had answered the call. It was a strange turn of events, but it gave them a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the humans could make a difference. And with that, a human fleet began its journey into the unknown, heading straight for the heart of the darkness. As the ships prepared for launch, the captain of the fleet, a seasoned military officer named Captain John Graves, stood at the helm. He looked at the small fleet of human ships, wondering if they were truly ready for what lay ahead. But he knew one thing for sure: humans never back down from a fight. They had proven it time and again, in countless wars, in countless struggles. And now, they would prove it once more, for the sake of the galaxy. It was humanity's moment to shine. The battle between humanity and the alien forces raged across the cold, dark expanse of space. Captain John Graves stood at the helm of the Resolute, his eyes fixed on the flickering viewscreen as alien ships zoomed past, firing their deadly energy beams at the human fleet. His crew was working at full capacity, responding to every attack with calculated precision. But Graves knew they were only one small part of the greater war. If they were going to win, they would need more than just strategy. They would need the impossible. "Captain," Lieutenant Rachel James called out, her voice tense. "We've inflicted some damage on their ships, but they keep coming. They're not backing down. We're getting overwhelmed." Graves gritted his teeth, his mind racing. The alien forces were massive and powerful. their ships cutting through space with ease, while the human fleet, though skilled and resourceful, was outnumbered. They had no choice but to keep fighting, to keep pushing back. There was no other option. Keep pushing forward, Graves commanded. We can't afford to let them gain the upper hand. We'll take out their weak points, one ship at a time. The Resolute rocked as another blast slammed into its shields. The energy rippled across the hull, shaking the crew, but the ship held strong. Graves knew it wouldn't last forever. The shields were weakening, and soon they would be vulnerable. His fingers tightened around the armrest of his chair, his mind already formulating their next move. If the enemy was relentless, they had to be more so. Just then, an alert flashed on the control panel. A massive shadow loomed on the horizon. Graves squinted, his eyes narrowing as he saw the source of the disturbance. It wasn't just one ship. It was a gigantic vessel, unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Its size alone was enough to make the rest of the alien fleet seem insignificant. This was their command ship, the one controlling the entire operation. "This is it," Graves muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He knew this was the turning point. If they could take down the command ship, the alien forces might lose their coordination. They could turn the tide of the battle. "Target that ship," Graves ordered, his voice steady. "All weapons, focus fire on their command vessel." The human fleet shifted its focus, directing all their firepower toward the massive alien ship. Blasts of energy flew across space, each one striking the target, but the ship's shields were impenetrable. The Resolute fired again, and again, but it was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. "Captain, we're not making a dent," Rachel said, her voice tight with frustration. "Their shields are too strong." Graves' mind raced. They needed a different approach, something unexpected, something the enemy wouldn't see coming. Then it hit him. "Lieutenant, prepare the experimental weapon," Graves said, his voice filled with determination. "It's time to use the last resort." Rachel's eyes widened. "Are you sure, sir? We haven't tested it fully. The power levels are uncharted." "There's no choice," Graves said firmly. "We need to end this. Now." In the heart of the Resolute, hidden away in its depths, a special weapon designed by human engineers lay dormant, an experimental energy cannon capable of piercing the strongest shields. It was dangerous, risky, and untested, but humanity had always thrived in the face of danger. If this didn't work, there might be no chance for anyone to survive. The crew worked quickly, calibrating the weapon. A hum filled the air as the energy built up inside the cannon. Graves watched the view screen as the massive alien ship loomed closer, ready to strike. It was now or never. "Fire," Graves commanded. The weapon unleashed a powerful beam of energy, brighter than 1,000 suns. It shot through space with blistering speed, striking the command ship with a force that shook the stars themselves. For a brief moment, the alien ship seemed to shimmer, its shields flickering as the energy from the cannon pierced through them. The entire vessel shuddered, and a massive explosion erupted from its core. The alien forces faltered. For the first time in this battle, the enemy was stunned, their coordination thrown into disarray. Graves knew they had just made history. The tide had turned. Humanity had struck a blow that even the most powerful alien species couldn't ignore. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They were now a force to be reckoned with.